and welcome to Real Estate Live. It's fantastic to have you all with us for this session where we're going to be talking about the revolution that is agriculture. A very interesting topic, something that's not often discussed, so we're really looking forward to hearing more about this subject. I have a panel with me and I'll shortly be introducing you to all of those and also to our chair. But before I do that, I just want to remind you that Real Estate Live is here all week and we are discussing a wide variety of subjects, all free. So please do take a look at the website for more information about sessions that are coming up during the week. But back to today, and we want to hear from you. So I do want to encourage you all to talk to us this afternoon. You can do that by using the question and answer function on your Zoom. Please don't be shy. Please ask questions of our panelists and also chat to us using the chat function, and we will be able to bring you into the conversation in that way. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our panelists. And whilst they're all turning on their videos to join me this afternoon, we're also going to be launching a poll. So that's going to pop up on your screen. What will be the most significant trend for regeneration professionals in 2021? So as all of you are entering the room, do take, please, a few seconds just to look at these options and tell us what you think the most significant trend is going to be throughout the rest of this year. So now I'm going to pass over to our chair for this afternoon and introduce you to Andy Venables. Now, Andy is from a company called Hillsgreen, which is a rural marketing agency, but also very importantly for this subject this afternoon, he's a farmer. He comes from a farming background. It's in his blood. What better person is there to talk to us about the world of agriculture? Andy, over to you for this session.
Thank you very much and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me chair this session. And really, it's the one thing that I'm passionate about is agriculture. As has just been alluded to, I'm a dairy farmer's son, born and bred in farming, really passionate for the rural economy. But my career led me down a path to marketing. And I'm working in a digital marketing agency in Manchester before setting up Hillsgreen in 2016. So what a time to be talking about this subject. Off the back of Brexit and a pandemic that has really highlighted the importance of food production. And for those of you who don't know, the Ag Bill that went through Parliament the back end of last year, there's massive change on the horizon for UK agriculture. And Agri-Tech can play a huge role in sort of helping farmers improve the efficiency and profitability of their businesses. So I think that is enough of me, and I would like to welcome our panelists for this afternoon. I'd like to start by asking Nicole to just introduce herself.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nicole Sad. I'm the CEO of Rothamsted Enterprises, the commercial arm of Rothamsted Research. Andy, are you happy for me to do my little show now, presentation, or are you going to introduce the rest of us?
No, go ahead and do your presentation.
Okay, so I wanted to give our audience today a little bit of a show of the actual company we work for. So if I just share my screen, just to give you a bit of context of the world-leading research organisation that we manage. Andy, can you see that screen?
Yes, we can.
Lovely. So thanks very much for welcoming us here today. So Rothamsted Research, we're the home of the agricultural research, the oldest research institute I believe in the world. We've been going 176 years. So our ultimate goal is to look at food sustainability. So we look at soil health, crop health, insects, the whole ecosystem of how to grow good yield food for farmers. So and like Andy was saying, he's our end user. We're looking at ways to make sure that we have enough food to feed the world. So it's pretty important research that we do. There's a big change happening at the moment. The population is growing, there's limited land to continue farming. And obviously the increasing climate change and the different weather systems we're now seeing really has a strong impact on our food production. And we've got to ensure we have enough food to save the world. Now, what happened in 2015, Rothamsted Enterprises was set up to start welcoming our people to our campus. So we now open our campus up to small entrepreneurs and businesses that are looking at innovations in the agri-tech sector, because things are changing. So what we've got now is a home of 25 different tenants on our site, small innovation companies that have spun out, but really are based on Rothamsted because we're the world leading research organisation, and we can prove and test and prototype some of the ideas and innovation these entrepreneurs are coming. So we now are linked up with Hertfordshire IQ, the main sponsors of today. Innovation is really in the heart of Hertfordshire. We are part of 7 enterprise zones listed in Hertfordshire, and we're really trying to bring clean growth and sustainability to Hertfordshire. So we're partnered with BRE, the University of Hertfordshire, and also St Albans and District Decorum Councils. We've recently collaborated with Herts IQ to refurbish the Russell building on site, which brings new entrepreneurs to our site, creates 118 new jobs at Hertfordshire. And the main part of this refurbishment was focusing on sustainability and net carbon neutral ways to refurbish buildings, which is really exciting. So the whole aim of our ecosystem on site is to support entrepreneurs to obviously help feed the world. But the link in with Herts IQ is really to provide space for our small baby tenants to grow and start to develop their expertise in a great way of Hertfordshire. So that's a little bit about us.
Perfect. Thanks, Nicole. I'd now like Simon Hughes to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about your background.
Hi, Andy. Hello, everyone else. Yes, my name's Simon Hughes. I work for Mid Sussex Council. I'm responsible for, dare I say it, all things digital. So I go from turning machines on and off again to make them work, as you're probably all familiar with, to looking at how we develop our infrastructure and the impact of digital technologies, specifically fibre, Agri-Tech, etc., on the economy, not just in Mid Sussex, but in wider West Sussex. Andy, do you want me to do a brief couple of slides now, or should we wait for later and excite people later?
If you want to hold back and wait for later, go on then. Okay, I'd like to introduce our third and final panelist this afternoon is Paul McGrath. Would you like to say hello?
Hi, thanks, Andy. So my name's Paul McGrath. I'm a former diplomat at the Foreign Office and at the Cabinet Office. My background's in European policy. I now work for Lexington as a senior consultant, a senior counsel, really on Brexit and regulatory issues, and we engage with government on a number of the issues around agriculture and agri-tech, including the current plant breeding review. And my interests are really across the kind of Brexit and regulatory issues, what the government's going to do with the powers that it now has back from Brussels and under the agriculture bill. And that, I think, as Andy was saying, is what makes this such an exciting time for agriculture and agri-tech.
Perfect. And I think many people, you can look at Brexit as a threat, or you can look at it as an opportunity. And I just see there's massive opportunity in terms of where we are and the future potential for Agri-Tech. So what do you think the most important factor is in driving forward the success of the Agri-Tech sector now that we know where we're at with Brexit? That's to you, Paul.
That's fine. And so, look, I think the biggest single factor here is that the government did a trade deal with the EU, which creates 2 completely separate agriculture markets, EU and UK, with quite high barriers to entry between them and quite high checks at the customs for agricultural exports. So the sector gets the sort of pain of Brexit, if you like, and the pressure is there. And I think the willingness is there in government to look at the gains that might come from doing things differently, from diverging on regulation. So you can see at the minute that this is probably the area where the UK is going to diverge significantly from the EU first in terms of the kind of rules and standards that the approach that we take. There's the review on plant breeding techniques that I mentioned already, which is going to look at gene editing and GM. that is due to, well, the consultation on it concludes on 17th of March, so not far away. But I think you can already see that this is a government who are very keen, George Eustice in DEFRA, but also Boris Johnson and some of the key ministers, to look at opening up innovation in agriculture. So I think there's a very good chance that this government will license gene editing in a way that it hasn't before. It may even look at GM in a more open way, and it will be looking at other ways to kind of change the incentives in agricultural policy. We've got a very broad Agriculture Act that's now law, that gives ministers a lot of scope to define the policy without having to go back through Parliament or through detailed consultations in kind of lengthy ways. And I think this is an area where the government are very likely to diverge, and hope that will do a number of things. I think help the industry achieve some of the big policy aims that the government wants more generally: greening agriculture, increasing production. You mentioned the post-COVID world, greater resilience in terms of our kind of food supply, and also, frankly, attracting and retaining global investment into the sector, particularly the Agri-Tech sector. The politics play a part in this, and the government wants to show that there are areas in which there's a Brexit gain, that there's a dividend from doing things differently. I think this is top of the list, to be honest, and I would be surprised if we didn't see a loosening of the rules around what kind of tech you can use in agriculture, probably this year.
Well, that all sounds very exciting, particularly with my farmer hat on. So just to give you a little bit more insight to my farm, so we're 350 dairy cows based up in Cheshire. Fourth generation tenancy in terms of the farming business, and through my dad and my granddad, they've sort of continued to sort of grow the business. And I suppose just as much as I still get roped into farming and doing the milkings at the weekends and when we're short staffed, what I really like about the farm is running of the business and looking at the data and looking at how we can improve efficiencies and ultimately profitability within the business. So we have invested in Agri-Tech quite considerably over the last few years. We've got a robot that drives around our cubicle shed, pushing feed to the cows to increase feed intake. We've got bolus technology, which sits within the cow's rumen that monitors cows' temperature, alerting you to sick cows, alerting you to when they're on heat, alerting you to when you calve. So the big thing that has changed over those generations is the size of farm. And when you've got 50 cows, one man can monitor that farm quite closely, and the animals, and see how they're performing and check in on them, if they're getting sick. But when you're talking 350, 500 and more, it's a very challenging thing to do. So that's where technology can really help. I suppose the downside of that is where most farms are based, and being out in the sticks is the connectivity challenges that we may have. And I think, Simon, it's probably now a good time to share your slides in terms of what you've been up to, particularly when it comes to connectivity.
Okay, thank you. And I just wanted to add to the Brexit. When it comes to connectivity, another thing that will rapidly influence connectivity across the UK is some of the changes in state aid, and just the role of government and the market in providing that connectivity. So I'll just get up a few slides, if I may, that give you some indication of what we're doing. So first of all, what I want to do is just take you through Agritech. You probably all know what it is. The simple thing is we're moving from and have moved in various places, including yours, Andy, one farmer and their dog to one farmer and their agribot or agribots. That's really what we're talking about. This is just, I'm sure many of you already know, just some of the areas that are being worked on by Nicola. Andy, I know you use some of these, but just from things like drones. So in in mid-Sussex and the east and west Sussex. Agricultural colleges are holding workshops around drone usage. That's happening now in order to try and increase the knowledge about the potential there. Looking at the technical aspects of agrobots and so on. Andy, you talked earlier, and perhaps a little bit later, about your texting cows, which sadly no use of social media, but more about their own health. So lots and lots happening, and if you like, it's similar to a change that we saw with Bazalgette and the sewers, or even Brunel and the railways. Significant changes in our economy and the way that industry responds to it. And certainly for our work in mid-Sussex and east and west Sussex, clearly this work has been going on for some time. £90 million investment in 2018, 105 projects that came from that around the UK. But as you've said, Andy, a key issue is not just the technology being developed and the skills required to use it, but also critically the connectivity to enable it to happen. And we're seeing this across lots of markets and lots of sectors. And that is that data is king, data is coming through, and there is more and more data that will be traveling from connected devices. So whether it's your cow or your fridge, that will be sharing data with industry, but also yourself as to what you may need to do. And clearly that that's been seen by many a working group as a key issue within the UK. So this is just to give you a graphic of what we're doing in mid-Sussex and in West Sussex. This is something that if there are any nerds amongst you, or it may just be me, is called dark fibre. And that's basically these fibre bundles. They're not very big, they're about that big. And they travel all the way underground through, as you see here in green, the rural communities and urban communities. And what that enables is connectivity to be provided through, whether it's wireless or fibre connections, to rural communities, to rural businesses, to farms. And we're working with South Downs National Park and a whole host of other public and private businesses and organisations. The key principle that we're establishing really is that if we do this as a public body, it means the market can provide connections to places that have previously had black spots or no connections at all, not even phone connections, cheaply. So some of the companies we're talking to, in fact, just before this meeting, are looking at 1 gigabit connections for £10 a month. Now that's beyond, if any of you personally have a connection at home, yours is likely to be at least 4 times of that for that speed, if not 5 or 6 times more. So these fibres travel up right through South Downs National Park, going up through areas of outstanding natural beauty. The politicians love them because you can't see them. They're not like big pylons and so on. And also what they do, the way that we've mapped this, and we'll be mapping it across the whole area, is it goes close to SMEs, farms, and allows us also to connect mobile phone connections so that they can not just improve your current mobile phone connection, but can actually move to 5G technologies. So that's not just very fast, it's also fast and slow data, which predominantly the farming community will use more so. So that's what we're doing. That's around a £60 million investment so far. We're continuing to do that, and we're working very closely with the industry so that we can actually ensure that we have the right businesses available to present the right technology and develop it further. So that's what we're doing.
Thank you very much, Simon. Very exciting stuff, particularly when I think about my family and friends that are in farming, and usually they're having to lean outside a window to try and get mobile phone signal, or you just say just call the landline because we have no signal up here. It will make a real difference to those farming businesses. And I think the one thing that the pandemic has done within agriculture is it's forced change. And just I suppose on in real simple terms, if you know farmers, they're a social bunch, and quite often, farming can be quite lonely if there's only 2 or 3 people working on farm or whatever. So the opportunity to get out on farm and off farm, see what other people are doing, whether it's social events, whether it's sort of knowledge exchange, sort of seminars, but the best way to do it is usually over a pie and a pint in the local pub. And for the last 12 months, that has been a real challenge. And if you asked me probably 12 months ago, could I get a group of farmers on Zoom? I would have said no chance. But it has forced change, and those people that want to interact, they want knowledge exchange, they want to understand what new things they should be looking at, what challenges other farmers are having. So study groups, seminars, etc., they've all gone on to Zoom, and I think that there sort of presents another opportunity within Agri-Tech, because the farmers are more willing to, get into this sort of technology once they know how. They can definitely see the value. And one sort of anecdote that I will leave you with is that I suppose when I was working in Manchester, people's perception of those farmers and rural people working within rural and agri sectors as the typical old farmer with the tatty jeans tied up with bale string. When actually, they may well not always invest in their clothes, but there's some very switched on people within our sector. There's so much more opportunities than the sort of dirty, mucky jobs. And equally, GPS was in tractors way before it was in cars. So farmers will invest in this technology, and there is a lot of opportunity. If they can see the value in it, to invest. So we're now going to move on to the next sort of section, which is a Q&A, really. As it said at the beginning of the session, we really want to get you involved. So please use the Q&A chat on there. And you can actually, this is all new to me, but you can actually, once there's questions coming through, vote for the best one. So as they're coming up, I'll try and multitask and monitor those questions and put them to the panel. But to kick things off, really, Nicole, there's a lot going on at Rothamsted. It would be good to understand from your view how the agri-tech sector has changed within the last 5 years.
Okay, I think we've kind of all had experience in the sector from different angles, which is great because it shows the broad reach of this sector. And I think that's the real key driver. So obviously at farming hasn't really changed, but it's previously, but we've had to look at how we change because of climate change, and that's a big driver for all of us. So where farming, using pesticides all over the field might have been part of the problem, I think now we've pivoted ourselves to actually be part of the solution. So when you're talking about technology, one of our tenants, for instance, is looking at sensors. We're talking about connectivity in the field. So a bit like your cows, Andy, crop spraying, you spray the whole crop because you need to put the pesticides on and make sure you've got a good quality crop to harvest. However, actually, if there's only a problem in a small hectare of the crop, why do we need to spray everywhere? So actually these sensors are alerting to farming of just one area of crop spraying. So actually it's, again, a little bit more efficient for the farmer. It's not utilising all of your pesticides and therefore impacting negatively on the climate. And also it's more efficient with your time. So I think technology is changing the way we farm, having a really positive impact. But I think the breadth of the sector, and this is what's really exciting from the innovation piece, is, like you said, you have farming, traditional farming, you have in your head as these chaps in your tweed jackets. But actually, we still have those as well. We love those. But what we're seeing now is some startup entrepreneurs, tech companies coming in. So we're seeing robotics. We've got a tenant actually from the aerospace industry and was looking at a technology on aeroplanes that actually is just as critical to use in farming. Now, the breadth of this industry and this sector now is attracting so many different people to come and play in the sector, because you might have solutions. We talked about data a minute ago, big data. Formula One have big data. They know on a race how to manage that big data. Why are we not working with Formula One? So it's looking at all of those different companies and sectors and really converging now to really make an impact. I think what Paul was saying about the agricultural bill and the way that farmers receive their payments is going to really change the way of adopting new technologies, whereas it hasn't been maybe a primary concern before. Now it might be more of a primary concern for the farmers. So that agricultural bill I see as a huge opportunity for the innovation in the Agritech space that it wasn't there maybe 18 months ago. So I think the world is changing. I think with looking back into food sustainability, and I think 2 years ago, our local shops all ran out of spinach and courgettes. And I think it was the start of saying that these might not always be available in our stores. And how do we really look at food sustainability? But also, I think us as consumers have changed. We want better quality products. We want more local resource products. And we're looking at more closely now from our individual uses of food, in consumption of food. So I think farming has become much more conscious, and it's in our everyday world now, whereas we might have not been so connected before. And I think it's all coming together. And this year is a real opportunity, like you said, with Brexit, that actually this is going to be the start of the agricultural revolution. We're in it already, the agricultural revolution. So lots of change, lots of opportunity.
Thanks, Nicole. Yeah, it is very exciting. And although for all the challenges that the pandemic has brought on, but seeing those empty shelves, I think definitely brought home to the consumer the importance of food production and the importance of homegrown food production to feed our nation. And I think that whole I don't know. I see it because I'm in the farming communities. I'm just a farmer. What do you do? I'm just a farmer. Well, naturally, you play a vital role in feeding the nation. And I think, that tweak from farmer to food producer, I think is really key. And I think what you've just highlighted there about, the opportunities within this sector, it's not just, milking cows and mucky jobs. There is so much opportunity for people to get involved. And one thing that isn't going out of fashion is food. I think we're always going to need that. So hopefully that is opportunities for people to get involved. Now there is a couple of questions starting to come through. Simon, this one might be for you. So what is the opportunity here for the property and regeneration sector? What facilities do Agri-Tech companies need?
Yeah, I'm sure Nicole can answer this as well. I mean, what we're seeing is that Agri-Tech companies need access, obviously, to skills and knowledge and a place where they can innovate and test their equipment. That's key. So they need engagement with the sector, with farmers, and with others. So, what is important then within that is also how useful is that particular premises. So if you're looking at, the area I know, Sussex, you can find a lot of places where there can be good provision of business premises, rural business premises, but no connectivity, which is why we're focusing so much on enabling that for all areas. That increases rent, but also increases what you can do in that particular area. So if you can test your drones, you can look at vast data pools and analyze them because you've got equipment that can be in a rural area, and that's brilliant. And if you've got people that are the experts that you need, but who can also have a very good quality of life in that area, then you're onto a winner, really. So, that's what we've seen, and that's certainly when we've talked to real estate investors, angel investors for various companies that are starting up, or even ones that are growing further. Those are the things that they talk about. I'm not sure if those are similarly, Nicola's, if that's Nicola's experience as well. But this is a real opportunity for the rural areas to grow in a way that previously has been really difficult, because generally science and tech has moved to urban areas. But this is one sector where you need it to be within the rural community.
Perfect. Thanks, Simon. And Nicole, we have got a couple of questions for you, so we're going to keep you busy. One here, are there Agri-Tech clusters in particular places around the UK, or is it nationwide sector? Well, I'm sure you're going to be championing Hertfordshire, but...
Championing Hertfordshire, but east of England. I think we are, what we're seeing, this is an emerging market. And actually the skills in the UK, you've got different research institutes for sure, but then you've got the commercial organisations like Bayer and Syngenta you mentioned earlier. They've got their own innovation aspects as well. But what I suppose you have got a UK, we're trying to look at the moment, how we make the UK joined up to support innovation. So I just noticed another question, we want to support these small startup innovations, but we want to support them so they grow and scale up. So going back to my Hearts IQ, offer, I suppose, that's a big draw for us in Hertfordshire. We're part of this golden triangle, which you've got, Cambridge, Oxford, London. We're a good international pool, but obviously perfectly placed to have those skills and expertise in that area. And the whole purpose of us building that Hearts IQ and the sustainability, and it's a pipeline. So to start the entrepreneurs and innovation, we really have to have the credible research, and we're kind of bound by that, facility. But once they've prototyped, got investment, they need to scale up. They need to have some manufacturing. They actually some of them need to trial some, going back to the facilities question, some of them need to trial their robotics on site at a farm, because how do you know whether it works? So we've got, trials all going on our 800-acre estate. But going back, I suppose there are clusters. There are clusters forming. It's a real emerging market, but we're trying to be collaborative in our approach, because there's no point in competing. There's a lot of international Israel that's going a bit mad at the moment with Agri-Tech. We've got to be really strong here. So it's worth collaborating rather than competing. But is there a cluster forming in Hertfordshire? There certainly is. Are we going to, grow our expertise in Hertfordshire? Yes, watch this space, because we need to make sure those companies don't leave the UK and they don't have the infrastructure elsewhere. So yes, we're building it in Hertfordshire.
Good stuff. I hope that also answers your question, Stephen, as well. And I think just to add on there, Nicole, it's good about having the bases, but it's so important to have those farmer connections to go and trial product. We operated as a demo farm for a technology company that was trying to bring data all into one place to almost help their farmers manage their business better. And, they could have their techies down in Oxford trying to code and put something together, but they didn't know if it was going to work unless they had real data and a real farm to try that. So I think there's got to be some encouragement out there to get the farmers to connect more with these businesses. So like Nicole says, so they stay in the UK. Right, Paul, there is a good question here for you. So somebody's asked, is there an ask of the government here? Some sort of infrastructure investment appeal, and given the levelling up potential, now might be a good time to put it to the Treasury.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, because the government definitely sees agriculture and agri-tech in particular, I think, is a big part of the levelling up agenda, as well as the sort of Brexit diverging agenda. So I think that part of this ask is probably around let us use the innovations and technology that we will need in order to green agriculture, to increase production, to do some of that levelling up kind of around the country, to invest in high quality, high skilled jobs. Let us do stuff that actually international competitors like in the US or South America or East Asia can do, that we can't do as an EU member state. So there's an opportunity here, because we're taking the hit, if you like, from the all of the customs checks and the kind of delays at ports and so on. I think there's probably something here about the government's timescale and pushing on with this quickly. So I mentioned before that the plant breeding technique techniques consultation closes on 17th of March. The government's also looking, as part of the budget, at unveiling some sort of package of areas where they're going to diverge using the new regulatory powers that have come back from Brussels. So I'd be surprised if between those two events we don't see some steps to free up gene editing, at least, if not GM techniques, kind of first half of this year. And some of those big commercial decisions on whether companies expand or not, I think will follow that. But there's a big devolution angle here that we kind of need to be aware of too, and I think needs to be part of an ask in terms of government handling. If the government in London decides to go its own way differently from the EU and allow some of this technology, there's no guarantee that the government in Scotland in particular, maybe Wales, will follow suit. Agriculture has devolved. The politics are in play here. If the SNP win the Scottish parliamentary election this May, they will probably choose not to allow any opening up of gene editing and go with the EU rules rather than the UK rules. Now, under the UK Internal Market Act, anything you grow in, any product that's put onto the market in England has to be allowed for sale in Scotland, but it means that you couldn't use those techniques in Scotland if the SNP stick to their line. So there is something there to think about in terms of, investment and the UK market as a whole. And Northern Ireland is its own story, of course, because it will continue to follow EU rules and moving goods over there, agri-food, agri-tech would get more difficult if the two sides diverge. Final point is skills. I think skills and kind of certainty about people being able to bring the right skills to the UK and with their families and so on is probably an important part of growing some of those hubs or scaling up a business. So I would expect that the sector would probably have asks of the government in terms of, the new visa regimes.
Thank you, Paul. We've got another question come in now, just asking the panelists to elaborate regarding any resistance or awareness felt in traditional farmers with respect to losing market to controlled environment agriculture in large cities. Does anyone want to have a stab at that one? Quiet, I would say not.
I think it was a bit of a challenging question, just from our, I don't work with the end farmer at the moment, and our innovation companies do. We have special, where there has been a little bit of resistance, and maybe Andy, you've got some comments on this, is where companies have said to a farmer, this is a great idea, let's trial it on your land, where we might not have considered, actually, if we use a piece of land that could be growing and harvesting crop, it might have had, if it failed, it could have had a detrimental impact on the, some of the income generated from that part of, we're talking about arable here, part of land. So quite understandably, if it's going to impact negatively, financially with no reward for a farmer, I could see why that might have been a bit of a resistance. So something we had to that was something we had to overcome. And as a research institute, we were eligible for some funding so we could work on collaborative projects with farming, because there's no point in saying this is a great innovation if it doesn't work for the farmers. So that's one way we overcame maybe some of the resistance, because we were able to work on a project collaboratively without financially impacting. So that was just a particular instance, but I don't have any experience of the actual negative or resistant to controlled environments, because we're a little bit further removed than that.
Okay, thanks, Nicole. I'm going to head back to Paul now with a question here around how we in the UK scale up for the world market, who and how funded without the exit strategy. We too often look at and to, I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but I read that in terms of I suppose outside Brexit, how can we really, I suppose, champion agriculture and agri-tech on a world platform?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, because we hear a lot of talk about trade deals at the minute, but trade deals in agriculture do tend to be quite zero sum, and quite protectionist. And, if we want a trade deal with the US, for example, we will accept their food produce. That's not a negotiation. Like, there's a reason why the US doesn't have many trade deals. And what you see from some of the deals that the UK has done so far, which are kind of largely rollover of EU terms, is there might be tariffs lifted on some products. There might be quotas expanded, like with the Japan deal, but you're not getting kind of free access to another country's agricultural market, just as we are not giving it. We've got tariffs. So I think there is an important kind of balance that the sector needs to think about, and obviously the NFU and others have policies or positions on this, and between kind of protecting, if you like, the domestic producer and your kind of more aggressive exporting aims. Given that if you're trying to compete, if you're going to do, say, a US deal or a deal with the South American countries, Mercosur, where Brazil is at the heart of their production, they've got certain advantages that we just can't replicate, right, on scale or some of the economies of scale, and again maybe in some of the techniques that are used. So I think it's important to think about that balance in engaging the government. It's important to talk about innovation rather than anything that looks like lowering standards, because the government is quite reluctant to engage public debate around anything that looks like lowering standards. So I think this needs to be about the high quality that the consumers sort of feel UK agriculture produces to at the moment, and using innovation to kind of do some of those things better. But there's definitely a discussion to have with government about what kind of structural support could be put in place. And Nicole has mentioned this already. The Agriculture Act is just very loose framework. There's a load of filling in to do now. And, I think the sector needs to be going with its asks to George Eustace and the other ministers at DEFRA, because they can take those decisions, relatively quickly once the budget's out of the way.
Thank you, Paul. And on a similar sort of slant, how do you think the UK can continue to attract international businesses in the sector to have UK bases, I suppose, particularly in light of Brexit?
Yeah, well, I think we touched on some of the issues already. I think being more open to innovation is definitely going to be part of it. That's a competitive kind of advantage compared to the EU, which is the only big kind of agricultural market around the world that doesn't allow some of these techniques. I think as well, we've mentioned the skills bit. You've got to make it easy for highly skilled people to come in from other countries as part of an investment, and have that certainty about themselves and their families, and not be overly anxious about the visas. And then I think there's probably a need for a pretty ambitious agriculture strategy under the Act that actually makes some choices and takes some decisions about what the government is going to support over a kind of long term. So to take an example, the government changed the agriculture bill when it was still going through Parliament as a sort of post-COVID thing to add in food security as one of the kind of headline aims. And you mentioned this earlier, Andy. I think it's a post-COVID issue. I think there's a big market out there for a sense that the food was grown in Britain, or at least subject to kind of our controls and techniques. And that feels to me like it's going to be a big area where the government needs to provide that clarity for investors and for producers, for the farmers. What's it going to subsidize, and define that a lot more clearly with a long time frame of certainty, so that people can do that planning.
Perfect. Thanks, Paul. And we're coming up to the end of the Q&A, but if anybody's got any final questions that they'd like to ask the panel, please put them in the Q&A section. I suppose just one from me, really, to Simon. It's good to see what's going on in terms of what you're doing within connectivity for Mid Sussex, but what do you know is happening at other sort of local authority levels and actually continuing to increase this connectivity or solve this connectivity problem nationwide?
Yeah, well, the main thing that's going to be happening very shortly is the government are going to be introducing a funded program to provide rural connectivity around the UK. That's going to be launching probably in the next 4 weeks or so. And that involves zoning each part of the rural UK and working with alternative network providers to wire those places up. So the government are looking to spend 5 billion over the next 4 years to do that. So it's a rapid growth. What's also happening is, so we're one of 5 authorities. We're working together. So we're working with Greater Manchester, Blackpool, other areas, and we are working with alternative network providers. So we're smaller. They aren't the big players like Virgin and BT and City Fibre. They're small players who focus on particular technologies for less urban communities, so rural communities, and they are growing rapidly. So it's already happening, and I'm pretty confident, given the UK's industrial strategy, that this sort of connectivity will be ubiquitous within the next 5 to 7 years. You'll get gigabit connections everywhere on your 6G phone that will be launched then. And also, just to add, I think the other mistake in thinking, what's the opportunity globally for this is actually there are a lot of firms that are already global leaders in things like sensors. So if I just talk about the area that I work in, we have the University of Sussex and we have Ricardo, who develop sensors, funny enough, for Formula One, and they have that expertise and they work globally. And they are already looking at transferring their knowledge and skills into Agritech. So a lot of this, and again, if you look at aeronautical industry, a lot around Gatwick and supporting Gatwick and Heathrow, they are looking at and are currently developing drone technology. So not just the drones themselves, but how you function and what they can sense and so on. So it's already happening. This isn't sort of let's invest now for this to start happening. It is already happening. And those firms are already working elsewhere around the world. So the growth opportunity is significant. We don't have a problem with attracting investment and innovation. We've got companies that are very keen to be working in the UK, precisely because of the opportunities and the skills that are here.
Perfect. Thanks, Simon. And just to wrap up this Q&A, we are at Real Estate Live. So a question that I'm going to fire over to Nicole is that how can the real estate sector support the growth and development of the agricultural innovation?
Oh, good question. What we've experienced on our side is actually looking at the speed that these companies scale up. So I think there was a question about scaling up. The speed that these companies are securing investment and scaling up, we can't respond quick enough. So, but it's not just office space. When we're talking about entrepreneurs, it's that what we've seen recently is that really flexible open space where you can bring collaborators together and lab space that they can go off and work on their own IP and very private technologies. They need a mix of prototyping areas, a few external areas. So this space has got to have the ability to be flexible. I think that's the key message, and the ability to support business growth, where our companies have gone from 1 or 2 man bands to 5 to looking at 10 to 40 in 3 years. And that's couple, as with any entrepreneurs, they grow rapidly. And I think actually we can't respond currently quick enough to that demand.
Perfect. Were you going to add something to that, Simon?
Yeah, just absolutely. What Nicole says is exactly what we're finding. I would also add that don't forget the infrastructure around this. So if you are a real estate investor looking at things like where can, and I'll be only slightly technical, edge data centers be based. So these are not, massive data centers run by Amazon and whoever else in Ireland and so on. These are smaller data centres that will be around towns and those sorts of areas. There is a massive need for those, not just for Agritech, but for all other digital innovation and development. And those will be needed to stop latency, so data moving too slowly for functioning technology. Big need for that. And there's a real opportunity there.
Thanks, Simon. And I'm conscious of time, so we will start to wrap up. And a final question that I've been asked to put to the panel is that why Agri-Tech is such an important sector for the UK. So, Paul, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, I can. I mean, I think my fellow panelists are more qualified in a way, but they've both actually just touched on it in the previous question. There's already a flourishing, like globally competitive agri-tech sector here, with some of the biggest names having kind of well-established research centers or commercial operations, and so we have that kind of flourishing ecosystem, if you like, of research and commercial application already there in a number of hubs, and Nicole has mentioned some of them already today. You've also got John Innes around Norwich. You've got Cranfield University. You've got, I think the places are kind of relatively well known, but I think it's particularly important now because the government is moving the goalposts. It's looking to make some ambitious commitments on CO2 reduction, and agriculture is the second biggest emitter. So greening agriculture, I think, is going to be central to that that net zero target, and then the post-COVID stuff that you've mentioned already, and more food grown at home essentially, and a more competitive agriculture sector as we leave that EU market. And if we're not going to kind of align with their standards, then we take the pain. We might as well get the gain of the regulatory. So it's going to be important politically for the government. It's going to be a poster child for Brexit divergence, but it hits some of probably the biggest aims of this government in terms of kind of carbon reduction, global competitiveness, and kind of retaining and attracting global investment. So I think it's right up there in terms of priorities for the rest of this parliament.
Perfect. Thanks, Paul. Nicole, would you like to give your sort of final remarks on this subject?
I think I could summarise it as a perfect storm, really. So you've got all of that, all the policy changes that are driving action, which is great. We've got to meet these targets. But I think also it affects you at your home. When you see food shortage, people are a lot more aware of climate change. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we'd never had protests or very small, but now it feels like it's in the media. So it's in our lives a lot more as well. So the agricultural bill, I think joining up the dots, because we have a fantastic UK landscape already. It's already happening. It's just about talking to each other and being collaborative. But I think timing, and it's the perfect storm that it's just coming together at the right time.
Thanks, Nicole. And finally, Simon.
Yeah, I can only agree with Paul and Nicole, really. I think the sustainability key issue, whether it's using technology to reduce the use of fertilizers, so microdot applications, those sorts of things, and also productivity. And I'll if you like a sort of personal story, I'm very interested in the vineyards in Sussex increasing their yields. It's going to significantly help me and everyone I know. But bluntly, that's a personal experience, but that's the same for the UK and globally. So you've got the opportunity to increase productivity and increase sustainability, and that is something that the world badly needs.
Thank you, Simon. And finally, from me, we're coming up to the end of the session now. I've really enjoyed hearing what our panel's got to say on the subject. And like I said right at the beginning, it's an area that I'm really passionate about. And I see so much opportunity within this perfect storm, both in terms of how farming can change and develop, become more efficient, and improving the productivity and profitability to help feed the nation. But also, with my marketing hat on and, coming off the back of Brexit, it's a real time to champion, we have some of the best practices in the world when it comes to animal welfare standards and food production in the UK, and combining that with new Agri-Tech, products within that production. I think it can only help us get better, and I really think we should be all behind British agriculture and really start shouting about how good we really are. So I'm now getting the stare. It looks like that we're coming up to the end, and just thank you all for joining us today. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for the panelists for giving up their time, and thanks for White Label for putting on the event.
Thanks very much, Andy, and thanks to all of our panelists. It has been a fascinating hour, and it's really refreshing to be having these conversations. They're not the normal conversations we would have, and it's really, I think, proven to me that we need to have more of them. And clearly there's a lot of this happening around the UK, whether it be in Sussex or Suffolk or anywhere else in the UK. And I'm with you, Simon. I'm all up for opening those vineyards sooner rather than later. That sounds to me like a perfect way to finish this session. So yeah, that gets my vote. But more seriously, we are here all week, and we are back in June. So we'd really like to pick up this conversation and move it forward again in June, and get a wider view, and to ask all of you that have been watching to think about putting your questions, that we can keep this conversation going over the future months. That would be really, really helpful. Just to tell you what's happening now for the rest of tomorrow, actually, because we are at the end of the day now for Real Estate Live on Tuesday. So we kick off tomorrow at 9:30 with green investment and the drive to new energy. We then move into designing education buildings, and at 11 o'clock we're moving into Ealing. Isn't it wonderful the way we can just move around the country so easily at the moment? From Ealing, we're going to go on to talk about how global cities drive a global recovery at 1 o'clock, and we're finishing talking about buildings and placemaking for innovation between 2 and 3. So loads of conversations to be had, lots of opportunities to talk, and that's really what this week is all about. Let's keep talking, let's keep collaborating, and make a difference to our environment and to the regeneration of the UK. Thank you all very much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at a session again tomorrow. Thanks very much, and goodbye.